Welcome to Voices of 401, your union podcast, keeping you informed, empowered, and connected with the latest from your local.
Welcome to the Voices of 401. I'm your host, James Russworm, and I want to welcome you to the very first episode of the new Union podcast. For those of you who don't know me, I am a union organizer out of the Edmonton office. I started with the union back in 2022 when my colleagues and I decided we wanted to form the first video game workers union in Canada. We organized our union, we drafted up a collective agreement, we bargained that collective agreement, we had a strike over that collective agreement, and eventually we did ratify that agreement. And today I am proud to say that I'm able to serve the union as an organizer and to help deliver this new medium to the membership that we hope is going to be informative and helpful in keeping up with all the going-ons in the world today. So thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Our first episode is going to be mainly focused on the Safeway bargaining that took place last week. I'll shortly be joined by our local president, Thomas Hesse, and he's going to give his inputs and observations on what transpired last week. I was fortunate enough to be able to observe the bargaining. I was there as a bit of an advisor on some of the technical issues of some new proposals that the bargaining committee was bringing forth, and it was really encouraging to see the strong show of support at the bargaining table. On day one, we had over 60 people in that room, either from the union or bargaining committee members. We even had some observers from the local Teamsters union come in, and it was a great kickoff day in my mind. We had, of course, a bit of a somber overtone because it was Truth and Reconciliation Day, and maybe I was a bit naive in thinking that Sobeys might be willing to recognize that day as a statutory holiday, but alas, that does not seem to be the case as of yet. But we'll let President Hesse give all those updates in a moment here. If you were looking for a printed version of the update, though, you can find it at gounion.ca/Safeway Bargaining 2025. That's gounion.ca/Safeway Bargaining 2025. And there you'll be able to see all the proposals made by both the bargaining committee and the company. I will say that the company's proposals are, let's call it, disappointing. It was quite disappointing to see 71 proposals put forward, all with concessions by the workforce. Cuts to overtime pay, cuts to retirement funds, cuts to healthcare benefits. It's typically not what you'd like to see going into bargaining. So I think the bargaining committee is going to have their work cut out for them in the coming months, and they're definitely going to need all of your support from across the union to get a fair deal for these workers. But because it's our first ever episode, we thought it would be good to introduce ourselves, because you might be a new member, you might be a non-member, you might be someone who's just now getting active within the union. And 401 is the largest private sector union in Alberta. The union represents over 32,000 workers in a variety of different workplaces, such as grocery workers at Safeway and Superstore, the meat cutters at places like Cargill and JBS, to name but a few. 401 represents myself, video game workers and healthcare workers, and it's quite extensive. So I remember getting that question the first time I started talking to my coworkers about UFCW, and they said, the United Food and Commercial Workers Union? What does that have to do with video games? And I said, everything. They're a union, right? Just because the name says United Food and Commercial Workers, and that sort of was its founding, UFCW 401 wants to represent all workers across the province who feel they need representation. So if you are listening, you should always keep that in mind, that, just because a union has a specific name doesn't mean that they're not for you. And, our union is built on voices, and that's why this show is called Voices of 401, because we wanted to pursue any angle that we can to elevate workers' voices in the workplace. And so we want as many formats as possible to make sure that people know what's going on with their union, like what's going on with the Safeway bargaining that we're going to get into shortly, and any important events or topics that are coming up. We just figured, hey, we have microphones and a computer. We can make a podcast and share with the members what's happening. And here we are in 2025. Your union has a podcast, and I hope you're listening, and I hope you encourage your coworkers to listen as well, because in future episodes we're going to have lots of different topics on bargaining. We're going to have it on organizing a union, health and safety, the different committees within the union. We've got so many people that are going to be coming on this show and talking about all the great things that your union does, and we want you to be a part of that. So make sure you stay tuned. If you're listening to this on Spotify, or you're listening to this on YouTube, or wherever, make sure you follow it. I know you're sick of hearing like and subscribe, but I'm going to ask you to like and subscribe, at least for your own reminder when these come out, because we're going to have some really great stuff coming out. And if you are interested, or you have something you think would be interesting or to talk about on the show, make sure you get in contact with your union steward, and they can get in contact with your rep, and they can get in contact with us. Now we're going to turn to the topic at hand: Safeway bargaining. And who better to take us through that than our very own local president, Tom Hesse. Tom's a busy guy, but we were able to catch up with him today at a cafe and have some coffee and chat about the Safeway bargaining. So Tom, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for asking.
Oh, excellent. I appreciate you joining us here on our first episode. We wanted to talk about Safeway bargaining, which you were at this week. But to give our listeners a few more questions about who Tom is, how long have you been with the union?
Well, it's not a real complicated story. I'm a union president, but I've been involved with the union since I was very young. In fact, I got involved in the union when I worked at Safeway when I was a teenager. I was a shop steward as a teenager, and Safeway was a great place to work. And one of the reasons I really believe that it was a great place to work is because we had a union. We had a real voice that contributed to the culture of the store, a worker voice that contributed to the business, how the business operated. And of course, we had a voice for ourselves as the individuals that made the store work and created the profit for the company. And it was a great place to work, and a special place to work. I have a very fond memory of working at Safeway. And to this day, that fond memory informs much of my perspective on the issues that currently face Safeway workers.
So you've been with the company for a long time. You've been with the union for a long time. So September 30th, National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. You were there at the bargaining table when we sat down. What can you tell us that happened in that first meeting with them?
Well, we were, the room was full of, in a word, disappointment. The National Day for Truth and Reconciliation is a way that our society has looked in the mirror and said, we've done something wrong. And it's really cool to be able to admit that you've done something wrong and to try to make it better. Sobeys is a very large corporation, and if you look at their website and some of the statements that they make, they say that they care about this issue. But as my mother used to say, your actions have to match your words. And on the first day of bargaining, Sobeys was rather blunt in telling us that they wouldn't agree to make the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation a statutory holiday. And if you just drive a few hundred miles west, to British Columbia, Sobeys acknowledges and treats that day as a statutory holiday in British Columbia, and that's actually a smaller market for them than Alberta. So why not here? Why not show some leadership? Why not recognize this issue as so many Canadians do? And frankly, it's the right thing to do.
I agree 100%. The company brought about 71 proposals to the table. How would you describe what was in that package and any specific proposals that maybe jumped out to you?
Well, bargaining is about the workers bringing a wish list, and because workers just want to matter. They want to feel good about their job. They want to feel respected by their employer. Bargaining is about finding a fair balance as between worker rights, worker issues, and worker compensation, and the employer's need to operate their business in what is a competitive environment. Unfortunately, Safeway brought 71 proposals that they don't need, that don't recognize workers, that are completely at odds with their success and their profitability. Virtually every proposal was a takeaway or what we call a concession. Now, of course, we monitor carefully the rights of workers and the labor relations environment. And there are no settlements in Alberta as between unionized workers and employers that are concessionary. Everyone is getting wage increases and improvements to their terms and conditions of employment. No employers are insisting on takeaways. So it was really quite shocking. Really, I think it a lot of the workers that were present at the bargaining table, it really felt like an insult and really hit them right between the eyes.
Maybe for our listeners who maybe don't know the history, could you walk us through the background leading up to this point with the negotiations?
Well, bargaining happens in a context, and what is happening right now in Canada, particularly since 2022, is an affordability crisis. And to rewind a couple of years before that, our society was in shock and in tumult and strained by the pandemic. And Safeway workers went to work. They didn't get to put on their Facebook page, "Stay home," because they didn't get to stay home. And they went to work and they were scared. There were thousands of people going through grocery stores. They took care of those people. They brought food to the tables of Albertans, and they did it with courage and dignity. For a very brief period of time, they received pandemic pay, and then which we insisted upon, and then the company took it away as soon as they could. Coming back to this concept of the affordability crisis, in about 2022, we started to see unprecedented inflation in Canada. And that unprecedented inflation is cascading through every worker's life. People can't get by. The CBC reports that 60% of workers are $200 away from bankruptcy. Whether you work at Safeway or a nurse or you're a government employee or a teacher, all workers have something in common. They go to the grocery store and they can't afford to shop there. It is particularly insulting for someone who works in the grocery store. It's sort of this moral obscenity that you can't afford to shop where you work. And bargaining is all about that right now. People just want to get by. Every human being needs to feel like they matter, and Safeway is not treating people like they matter, especially their own hardworking employees who have made them very, very profitable.
And from what we understand, it's not just our union as well. We've seen Sobeys treating the Teamsters 987, warehouse workers who are currently locked out. What would you say to Safeway members about the importance of standing strong and staying engaged during this round of bargaining?
Well, as individuals, we don't have a lot of power. Sadly, if we burn out, you're kind of like a light bulb. And, big billionaire-run companies, you burn out and they just screw in another light bulb. We see some rising unemployment. People have a sense of desperation, looking for jobs. And so people have very little power as individuals. But workers have significant power when they act collectively, because if all the workers don't show up for work one day and all the light bulbs don't light up, then the workplaces are dark and there is no additional money to be made by the billionaires. It is true that a small union in Alberta, it's called the Teamsters Local 987, is on strike at a Sobeys warehouse. And their fight is the same as ours, and we need to stand strong with them to send a message to Sobeys that an injury to one vulnerable worker is an injury to all workers.
That's very true. We know some members are already asking about a possible strike at Safeway. What would you tell them at this stage of negotiations?
Well, I mean, it's too soon to panic or to overreact. But unfortunately, Safeway, under Sobeys' ownership, has shown a consistent pattern of indifference to its employees. In fact, they've acted very aggressively towards their employees. Shocking, really, in the service industry, because if you don't believe in your business, then the service that you provide to customers is not going to be up to the level that is frankly necessary to even make the business competitive. So, Sobeys is really shooting themselves in the foot with their approach to their workers right now. A strike is always a last resort. It's no fun. And, we're going to bargain in good faith and try to be reasonable and try to find a middle ground. But if you are dealing with a bully, and if the facts reveal that an employer is a bully, standing up could be the only option. If you keep showing up for work every single day under the terms and conditions that you currently have, without getting a raise, without being respected at work, and you keep showing up for work, what would incentivize Sobeys to treat you any better? And so workers in democratic societies often say, by way of a strike vote, hey, unless you treat me better, I might not come to work. That's not that radical a concept. Think about that. Unless you treat me better, I might not come to work. And the only employees that have the right to say that are unionized employees. Having a union is a privilege. Having a union is something special. And I encourage people to use the union that belongs to them, to find that voice. It is a real benefit.
Yeah, that's great. I would just want to ask you one final question, Tom, today. And what's one message you'd like to leave with Safeway members as they follow through with these negotiations?
The message I would leave is, this is your time. They own the structure, they own the property, Sobeys owns the buildings. But employees, they own the spirit, they own the culture, they own the feeling, they own the tone, they own the interaction with the customers. I know that Safeway employees take pride in who they are and the work that they provide. They take pride in the fact that they have a union. They take pride in the fact that they are members of the labor movement. And this time, during an affordability crisis in a divided world, it is time to stand up to be counted. And that is the message that I would share and encourage at this time.
Well, that's a powerful message, Tom. I want to thank you for taking the time today to chat with us, and I'm sure we're going to have you back on the show in the future for some more in-depth discussion. But is there anything else you'd like to add today before we wrap up? All right. Well, sounds good. Thank you so much, Tom.
Thank you.
And thank you, everybody who joined us today for our very first episode of Voices of 401. Remember, you can find all the information about Safeway bargaining updates on gounion.ca/Safeway Bargaining 2025. That's gounion.ca/Safeway Bargaining 2025. And don't forget to like and subscribe our content if you enjoyed what you heard today, or you leave us a comment or a thumbs up or a subscribe. This is all kind of new territory for us, so we want to know what you think and what's important to our members. So once again, I'm James Russworm signing off for this episode of Voices of 401, and we'll see you very soon in the next one.